Welcome to our current events lecture. My name is Michelle Green, and I will be your teacher for this class, where we are going to focus on gun control in the United States. The first thing I'd like to have us do is go over our objectives for this course. There are three of them. First, we want to learn how history and the U.S. Constitution have affected the issue of gun control in the United States. Secondly, we want to critically think about and be able to respectfully debate the arguments on both sides of the gun control debate. And finally, we want to understand why gun control in the United States is an important cultural topic and to look at the role the media plays in this topic today. So first of all, for our first part or section of this class, we're going to focus on the history of United States gun control to give you some context into why the debate has gone the direction that it's gone in our present day. So, of course, the very first thing we're going to want to look at is the actual Second Amendment that was written in the 1700s and that we look at today as we try to decide what to do about this debate. And it says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And so, as you can see, this is a lot more vague than maybe you might have pictured before. Maybe you've seen this quote, the quotation from the Second Amendment before or not. But there's a lot to be interpreted. And one thing that especially is difficult to interpret is the word itself, arms. What does arms mean? Does that mean that we can arm ourselves with kitchen knives and pitchforks? Does that mean we can have handguns? Does that mean we can have semi-automatic rifles? What does that really mean? How do we interpret that? And not only that, to think about historically when this was written, maybe the intent for which this was written, in a time period where people had to protect their property from wild animals, they had to hunt. That's a lot different than the type of environment that we live in today. And so do we still interpret this the same way as they might have intended it to be written? And that, again, is why it becomes so complicated or convoluted and can be debated both ways. So we're going to go ahead and watch a video. So, as you watch this video, I ask that you consider why the right to own a gun is such a controversial political issue in the United States.
Gun ownership has been intertwined with the identity of America since the settlement of the 13 colonies. The Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees Americans' right to keep and bear arms. But this simple phrase has led to decades of debate around gun control legislation and limitations on gun ownership, arguments that have gone all the way up to the Supreme Court. But to understand why the Second Amendment has provoked so much debate, we have to go back to the earliest days of the United States. At the time the Founding Fathers began drafting the Constitution, there were two major political groups, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Federalists believed in a strong central government. The Anti-Federalists, fearing monarchy and tyranny, favored strong state governments. This debate also spread to the young country's military. Federalists believed a strong standing army was necessary to defend against foreign attacks and large-scale domestic unrest. Anti-Federalists believed those attacks could be prevented by states' militias, who could be called upon in a time of national crisis. They were weary of large military forces, having experienced the oppression of the British Army both before and during the Revolution. This was a time when gun ownership and self-armament were already well established in the soon-to-be United States. Half of American colonists owned guns by 1775. More Americans had guns in their homes than had chairs or books. They had experienced British attempts to control through disarmament. But guns weren't just about protecting citizens from tyranny. Guns reinforced domain over property. And in the South, property meant slaves. Slave owners had a higher rate of gun ownership, and Southern militias focused less on protecting against the government's use of the military to oppress them and more on keeping slaves from fleeing their masters or from outright rebellion. James Madison, a slave owner from Virginia, had all of these groups in mind: Federalists, Anti-Federalists, militias in the North and South, when he drafted the Second Amendment. The Constitution allowed for the raising of a federal army, but the Second Amendment was introduced as a compromise to make sure that this federal army was not going to be turned against the citizenry, striking a balance of power between the states and the federal government. At the time, the Second Amendment was not primarily seen as an individual's right to bear arms for their own protection, but rather As the writings of colonial thinkers like Noah Webster and Alexander Hamilton suggest, it was about enabling citizens to be part of a collective militia that would avert the use of the nation's military at home. Gun ownership evolved as the country expanded, and differing interpretations of the Second Amendment have developed over time. The Supreme Court has heard many cases involving the Second Amendment, but never established gun ownership as a personal right outside of the context of some sort of military service. That is, until 2008, with the case of the District of Columbia v. Heller. Dick Heller was a D.C. cop who applied for permission to keep his sidearm at home, but because the city had enacted a handgun ban, his permit was denied. The court ruled in favor of Heller that the D.C. handgun ban was in violation of the Second Amendment. In his majority opinion, Justice Antonin Scalia wrote that the Second Amendment guaranteed an individual right to possess and carry weapons in case of confrontation. The court did acknowledge some limits, such as firearm possession by felons or in places such as schools or government buildings. This was considered a departure from legal precedent, which had largely derived people's right to bear arms in the context of a militia. The Heller decision was a huge moment in the gun rights debate, as gun violence continues to plague the nation. Some believe that an armed citizenry is safer. Others believe more guns directly lead to more violence. However you see the issue, most can agree that debates surrounding the Second Amendment will continue to rage on.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the court case that was referenced in that video. This is the DC versus Helen court case. Just as a reminder, the Supreme Court cannot create new laws, but they can take the laws that are in place and decide if they are in line with the Constitution and can stay, or if they are not in line with the Constitution and if they shouldn't exist and that they should be gotten rid of. So to go over kind of the main highlights of this court case, I apologize. It was the first time since 1939 that the Supreme Court ruled on the Second Amendment. The outcome was that individuals have a right to personal possession of firearm outside of military service, and that includes the right to possess and carry weapons in case of confrontation so that you can use it to defend yourself both out of the home and also in the home for self-defense. They did stipulate a few exceptions. People could not have these personal firearms if they had felons or if they were diagnosed with a mental illness. And the firearms are not allowed around schools or in any government buildings. And we actually have a court case that is upcoming. So this is the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association. It's scheduled to be discussed in the Supreme Court at some point in the next year or so. So to go over some of the highlights of this case, this is reviewing a New York law, which so far has been upheld by lower courts, that requires individuals to get a license to carry a concealed gun outside of the home. New York is one of 7 large population states that has strict concealed weapon laws. For example, to be able to get a license to carry a concealed weapon in New York City or in the state of New York, you need to prove that you need it to protect yourself for your job, would be like one example. So perhaps you are someone who owns a small business and you have to carry the cash from the till at the end of the night and bring it to the bank, and you don't want to have to carry all that cash unprotected. That would be like an example. So some implications of this court case: it's one of the few gun cases the Supreme Court has agreed to view since 2010. And Justice Kavanaugh has suggested that Supreme Court needs to look at a gun rights case soon to ensure that everybody on the nation's on the same page and we have some more unity and solidarity about this issue. And the hearing comes after a series of recent mass shootings. Okay, we're ready to dive into the next section of this class, which is the current climate of gun control. We're going to look at some infographics. So the one on the left was taken from the Small Arms Survey in 2018. This shows that for every 100 residents or people living in that country, how many guns are owned total by that amount of people. So on average, for every 100 residents in the United States, we have 120 guns. And you can see that the countries that are below us as the next top gun-owning countries aren't even close to the amount of guns that we have in the United States. On the other side, this is taken from the CDC from 2019. This is how gun-related deaths break down. And so often when we talk about gun control, our minds immediately go towards mass shootings and homicides. But as you can see, about 2/3 of gun deaths are actually suicide. And then we have about a third are homicides, and then another small amount that are accidental deaths and war casualties. Okay, the next set of infographs we have come from the Gallup University and the Giffords Law Center. The one on the left shows Americans' attitudes towards gun laws. So you can see that about, depending on the year, about 50 to 65% of the population in the United States think that gun laws should be more strict. And then again, down below, you can see the yellow line that depending on the year, between 35, maybe a little bit less, 28% to 45%, believe that the laws are good as they are, and that down at the bottom, that kind of bluish teal line shows that about 8 to 12%, depending on the year, believe that gun control laws should be less strict. And that might be something that's very surprising to you as you look at, maybe you would have thought that attitudes toward gun laws would be very different. And then on the right, we have states with assault weapons restrictions. Just as a reminder, assault weapons are weapons that shoot faster, and they can be automatic or semi-automatic, and they're typically used in the military. And that the word restrictions in this case means that there are laws in place in those states about what kinds of people can buy these assault weapons, how much ammunition they can buy at a time, etc. And so you can see that we have one state that regulate but do not ban assault weapons, and then we have a bunch of other states, mostly on the East Coast, but then of course California and Hawaii as well, that have assault weapon bans. It's just absolutely no one can buy them for any reason. And so you can see from these graphs that attitudes and legislation around gun control are very different depending on which state you're in. Each state has its own gun laws. For example, the state of Illinois has really strict gun laws, yet high gun violence, in the city of Chicago at least. And the state of Indiana, which is really close to the city of Chicago, has very different gun laws, which makes it easier for people to go purchase guns in Indiana and then bring them back into Chicago, Illinois with them. And so, depending on where you are around a state border, that might deeply impact how gun control is going in your state, because people might just cross the border and buy guns where it's easier to do so. In September 2021, Texas passed a law that allows anyone who can legally own a firearm to carry it in public. So before this, people had to obtain a license or permit to do this, and this makes Texas the 20th state to use this practice, which is called constitutional carry. That we have, the Constitution says that we can't limit gun control, or we can't limit people's right to bear arms, and so anyone can carry a firearm in public with them. Alrighty, we're going to go ahead and watch another video now. This is going to show a group of people kind of discussing the issue of gun control, and there's going to be some people that are pro-gun, some people are anti-gun, and they're going to try to attempt to have a civil, respectful conversation and really discuss what kind of solutions are possible.
The area that I grew up in, sometimes a gun is the only way to protect yourself. You're anti-gun. You don't want nobody to have guns. But then that's going to put my family at danger.
The pool to the left, I'm going to have all my pro-gun people go stand on the edge of that light, and all my anti-gun people on the other side. First statement is, I think my views on guns could change.
I feel like anyone's views can change on things, so I'm kind of surprised that nobody felt like it could change at all. I don't think that I could change completely to the other side, but I would definitely be open to looking at it from a different perspective.
I think that my stance is very accommodating to both sides. That said, I feel really solid about kind of what I've learned and what I think is possible. So I feel really solid about that, although I'm, open to accommodating for people's needs, people's wishes with their rights. My name is Aaron Clayton. After the Orlando shooting, I realized that my community was very much a target. I had to get involved to do something.
Sometimes I think people on the other side of the issue don't care about me or my loved ones' lives.
I gotta go with that one. I gotta go go with that one.
Actually,
I mean, the area that I grew up in and where I come from, a lot of you may not be able to understand that sometimes a gun is the only way to protect yourself. We all believe there should be certain rules to getting them, but on my side of the earth, there is no gun laws.
My name is Asani Hill. Regardless of whatever you say, there's always going to be guns. There's always going to be violence in the world, and I got family to protect.
I don't think y'all don't care about me or my family. I think we all care about each other and each other's others. Loved ones.
I don't care about y'all. I'm trying to protect me and mine. That's my reason of saying that nobody else cares about it, because I'm pretty sure y'all have the same insight. Like, you're anti-gun. You don't want nobody to have guns. But then that's gonna put my family at danger.
I don't want
That's not
nobody.
at all.
Yeah, I don't want
that's at
nobody
all
to have
what we're
guns.
saying. I think that there
That's
are
just
ways.
how I feel. Like,
Totally.
yeah.
The pro-gun people a lot of times are like, well, it's never going to be solved. Like, gun violence is never going to end. And like,
It won't.
It won't, and you're absolutely correct. But there's a bunch of ways to decrease it.
I've been in a situation in which my life was in danger.
I grew up in St. Louis, so we'd go downtown where there's a huge amount of violence. We're at Home Depot, and there's guys starting to gather around my dad's truck, and I'm in it alone. I'm 14 years old. And literally I had to pull my dad's gun out while I'm shaking, and literally just set it on my lap. And to show that, it ended up potentially violent, potentially robbery,
I don't think people automatically are born like, I'm pro-gun. Like, I think what you experience in your life makes you that way. My name is Sarah. It wasn't until recently that my opinion changed on how I felt about guns, and then I became pro-gun in order to protect me and my future family. I was never pro-gun before, and then some guy broke into my place and raped me. And I couldn't run away, I couldn't do anything, like literally had to lay there and take it. But I knew that if I had a gun at that point in time on my nightstand, I would have defended myself.
I think America has a problem with mass shootings.
Yeah, I think we all should step forward for that one. Come on.
It'd be ignorant to say it's
another
not an
problem,
issue.
yeah. Of course it
Like,
is.
I don't want anyone to die. Like, I don't want to see these school shootings. I don't want people to get hurt. We're all for protecting ourselves. But I think, like, when guns are not in the right hands, then it becomes an issue. And I don't think any of us support that at the end of the day.
So you all for like stricter gun laws or no?
I mean, there's a point where it goes too far. I don't think I need to take a 5,000 questionnaire for a psychological test.
But like, isn't that worth it? And like, I'm not saying that that's necessarily what we would definitely do or whatever, but like a 5,000 questionnaire or like people's lives.
But sometimes
like, wouldn't you
Would
rather?
Would you be willing to go through the same process to get an automobile? Training, licensing,
Yeah.
classes,
Yeah.
a renewable license.
Yeah, but not a psychological test.
I think it doesn't have to be so extensive, what you're saying, but it's sad how someone can come into a gun show and have a lot of money, buy whatever they want, show maybe a little card or something, and get like maybe 20 guns. And no one's asking you just because you have money. A simple background check can just do a lot for people.
But I also think that a lot of people, like, because they don't want to have the conversation about gun violence, and they switch over and say, like, oh, it's mental illness. And, like, that needs to be talked about, too. But gun violence is a separate issue that also, like, really needs to be talked about.
If my life was in danger, I would kill.
Oh, hell yeah.
Can I walk faster?
No, I literally don't think I would have, like, it in. I don't know if I would have
Nobody has it in them until the moment comes.
Yeah.
Like, literally, fear doesn't even become a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Like, it disappears, and it's like fight or flight.
Yeah.
Like, and you either freeze and die, or you make it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'm gonna make it.
Some people don't got it in them. You can always just, shoot them in a place where they won't be able to move.
Yeah, well, that's what some people think. But when I went to I did my carry and conceal class. They said if you're trying to shoot them in the leg, you have enough time to get away or to realize you're not in danger. Your life isn't in danger, And so they said, if you're pulling that gun out and you're shooting somebody, you're shooting to kill.
I guess I don't understand. I understand fighting for your life. That's why I came to the center, for sure. But like all this talk about like how to protect ourselves, how to be in these situations, blah, blah, blah. It's like, again, we're just increasing guns. And I want to bring us back to like, how can we combat this from the other end? I don't want to carry guns. I don't want to have guns in my club. I don't want to. I want to be there to dance. I don't want to have a firearm on my leg and like.
But we
be with
live in a
friends.
society that.
Yeah.
So you
So
rather
can't
just
we-
not
but
have a gun?
I don't think we
But
can
can't we-
retract from that though.
Yes,
Like,
we can.
We can because other countries have done that.
Yeah, but
That's
you're
right.
taking the right away.
No,
at
no,
that
no. But
point.
wait. If I can prove to you that there are ways to enact gun reform that will decrease the amount of guns out there, increase education, and not hurt the ability of law-abiding citizens to have access to firearms, would you be willing to discuss ways to do that?
Yeah, like I said, I'm all for education, but I don't think like at the end of the day, like if someone's trying to kill me, I'm gonna kill them. I mean,
Okay,
I'm not,
so that's
yeah.
but that is, you're allowed to right now. You're
Yeah.
allowed to have that gun, and so we keep kind of saying what is already in place. This is already possible to have all of these guns. Like, how can we start looking at this and changing our minds and our Congress, our government, leaders' minds? You guys keep talking about education, but that is not a reality. In that we're not allowed to instill reform that gives us gun education. So it's just like layman's ideas, batting around ideas on how to kill.
I'm overall against violence at the end of the day. I wouldn't need or want to have a gun if there wasn't violence in the world. But sometimes it's a right because it's a necessity sometimes.
So how do we do that, where we start changing the conversation, where people don't immediately relate pro-gun to, or
wanna
don't,
take all your gun away,
that
yeah.
pro-gun can equal pro-gun reform.
Oh, I mean, that's why
The
we're all
issue-
here.
That's why we're all here.
We're all risking something by saying something. I always taught that don't ever state your opinion on hot topics because you're just asking for it at that point.
Right.
But I feel like you have to speak up because being silent is being just as guilty.
I think the society
Yeah.
needs to learn to speak. Like, educated people need to sit down, come together, and talk about things. You guys have something to say, and we said it, and we accept all of each other's views.
Yeah, I told you we wouldn't all leave hating each other.
All right, everybody, that's a wrap. Thank you, guys.
Okay, now we're going to look at some common pro and con arguments about gun control laws. So on the left side, we're going to have arguments that are for gun control, and on the other side, we're going to have arguments for gun rights. As I go over these, just to let you know that these all come from a website called procon.org, which draws its research from a wide array of sources. Please note that the information presented here represents common opinions and arguments from each side of the debate, and we're not going into like a deep statistical information or research here. You'll also notice that it seems like some of the arguments are directly contradictory or in completely opposite, and so it seems like, okay, how can we state those when those two things are saying opposite ideas? And so one thing that complicates the issue is that depending on how you look at the research and statistics, there's evidence to support both sides of the argument. If the information on this issue is easy to present and interpret, it would be easiest to come up for a solution because we'd all agree. So that being said, we're going to go through each argument. So the Second Amendment is not an unlimited right to own guns, and the Second Amendment protects individual gun ownership. Guns are rarely used in self-defense, versus gun control laws trespass upon the right to self-defense and deny people a sense of safety. High-capacity magazines, meaning kind of like semi-automatic rifles like we talked about earlier, should be banned because they often turn murder into mass murder. Gun control laws, especially those that try to ban assault weapons, infringe upon the right to own guns for hunting and sport. More gun control laws would reduce gun violence and deaths, including suicides. Gun control laws do not deter crime. Gun ownership deters crime. More gun control laws are needed to protect citizens. Gun control laws give too much power to the government and may result in government tyranny and the government taking away all guns from citizens. Legally owned guns are frequently stolen and used by criminals, and gun control laws will not prevent criminals from obtaining guns or breaking laws are an invasion of privacy for law-abiding citizens. So this enters into our last section. What is your opinion on this issue? So this is a little activity. I'm going to give you guys about 2 or 3 minutes to do it, and then we'll come back to the lecture. So you're going to write down 1 to 2 arguments in favor of gun control in the U.S. that you heard in the video or saw in the previous slides or have heard before. And then you're also going to write down 1 to 2 arguments in favor of gun rights. So notice you're writing 2 for both sides of the argument. And then after you've kind of visually seen 1 to 2 for gun control, 1 to 2 for gun rights, you're going to take a few minutes to write down your own thoughts and feelings about the argument. So again, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back to the lecture. And that takes us to our last section, which is the media's role. So right here we have 2 headlines, and they're both describing the exact same event, which was a shooting at a church in Texas in 2019. This happened only months after legislation passed in the state of Texas that allowed licensed handgun owners to carry their weapons in churches and other places of worship. What happened is a gunman opened fire at a church and killed 2 people before an armed member of the church's volunteer security team fatally shot the gunman. Or the gunman. So how could these different headlines impact our opinion? So these 2 different headlines about the same story would definitely impact how the people thought about the issue. And so you can see how this event could be used as an argument for both sides of the issue, depending on how the story is described. Are we focusing more on the fact that an armed person stopped the gunman in the church, or are we focusing more on the fact that someone carried a gun into church and opened fire and killed 2 parishioners? So again, it's just all in the way that we phrase the facts that happened. All right, so to conclude, we just want to have this final thought. How does the media's reporting on current events affect your thoughts and feelings about the United States? And of course, this can be about gun control and really any current event, that depending on which sources you're looking at and what kind of biases those sources are leaning towards, or the type of picture they're trying to paint, that will definitely impact how you view the situation and therefore how you feel about a certain topic. And it's just really important to be mindful of that and to do your best to seek to get information from multiple perspectives to kind of keep us all in check. And so that brings us to the conclusion of our lecture. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I hope you were all able to learn more about the historical events and how the Constitution comes into play and kind of the current climate and have an opportunity to think about how you personally feel about this issue. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.